Hello everybody, it's Julia with Julia May Photography, and tonight I'm actually doing some work for one of my regular clients, which is Dinner Dispatch, and that is a prep delivery service, local. Meals are prepped ahead of time and then you cook it fresh, and it's a really great way for busy people to have healthy meals just prepped and ready to go, and then the cooking time usually only takes about 20 minutes. So I have two parts to my job, which is the photography, and I do their photography for them, but I'm also part of the testing crew. With this type of photography, they actually want to make sure that the meals are realistic, so not overly styled, because they want it to look good, but at the same time they don't want it to look like something that it won't turn out looking like, if that makes sense. For dinner tonight, we are going to have, this is what the test meals come in. Oh, and I'm part of the testing crew, so I'm testing recipes as well. So that's another reason so I'm actually eating this food. So that creates a few challenges, because usually when you're food styling, you will have several different, like if there's one piece of chicken, you might make 10 or 15 pieces of chicken and use the most beautiful piece to use for the photos. Well, in this case, there's 3 portions that I get, so pretty much I get 3 tries to make sure I get this right. So no pressure to make sure everything turns out looking good. So I do the cooking, I test the recipe, I shoot the photos, we taste the food, and then I give feedback and let them know if there are any problems along the way. So step number 1 is I read the instructions carefully. Uh-oh, they forgot the rice. So sometimes there's little snafus like that, where in this case the rice got forgotten. And the reason that I check the directions very carefully is because not only am I wanting to make sure that I'm making it according to the directions so that I can give feedback on whether the recipe was correct, but I also have to think about the procedure that I'm doing so that I am making sure the food turns out. Now, my own photography, a lot of times I only photograph, like if I'm just photographing food for fun, there's plenty of meals I make that don't look like anything special. It might taste great, but I only photograph what looks pretty. Well, in this case, it has to look pretty. So I definitely have to read the instructions and then make sure that my strategy for preparing is the most attractive without deviating from the instructions too much. Okay, so the first thing we are doing is boiling water for rice. Now, they have this really cool rice method that I've never used before, which is the pasta method, and you boil water like you would for pasta and then put your rice in, and it's great because it doesn't boil over like I usually do with my rice when it first comes up. So here's the strategy I came up with. That's boiling, so while I'm waiting for the water to come to temperature, all I have to do is brown some beef, and I think it's actually going to take longer to cook that rice or boil that water than it is to cook the beef. So I'm going to use this time to go set up the photo area. And now that I've seen the ingredients that I'm going to have, so I'm going to have beef and broccoli, and then there's kind of the sauce is kind of a reddish brown color. So I'm going to take that into consideration for what I use for my background. So I'm going to get that set up and have that all ready to take the photos, and take my camera upstairs too. So I'll see you upstairs. I'm back. Okay, so we're upstairs, we're in the studio, and I have this set up next to my window because I am going to use natural light for this. The light is actually the sun's over on the other side of the house, so this is nice and indirect. I'm really going to miss this when the sun starts going down at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'll have to figure out a new lighting scheme with my studio lights. But it's been really great to do it with natural light. So I have this stack of just scrap material that I've had for a long time that I use for basically, it looks like a tablecloth. Some of these pieces have these lines in them from where they've been folded for a long time. I'll have to edit that out later. I've tried ironing, I haven't figured that part out yet, but it doesn't take much to edit that out. See, we've got, I think I use a white plate. I think I used this gold recently. It's really pretty, but I think I used that recently. So I'm actually gonna move this over here. I'll put it to the bottom of the stack later. I think I'll use this. Kind of a nice neutral. And then I think I'm gonna pick out something that's a napkin. Gonna go to the studio closet, I'll be back. So I'm gonna go with this green stripy fabric. It's just a piece of fabric. I think I'm just gonna fold it up like a napkin. So I'm gonna fold it like this, so it kind of gives it a finished edge. And then fold it like that. Tuck the ends all under so that it just looks like a finished napkin, even though it's got raw edges. I'm just gonna tuck that in there. My plan is I'll put the plate about right in here. And if there's any stray pieces of thread in there, I can just edit that out later. And then I might use a piece of silverware, and I have silverware over here. So I've got these cool old forks and knives and spoons. So we'll start with it just right there like that. And then we'll see if that's gonna look cool. Okay, and my camera's here, ready to go. I have a 50mm lens on. It's really great for getting some really nice depth of field, like low depth of field. So it's just kind of in focus in one spot and then blurred in the background. So I usually give them at least one photo like that. And then I do an over the top that where everything's in focus, and then it gives them some flexibility for what they use the pictures for. I have a background set up here and it's just white, and that's helpful because it bounces a little bit of light back in. So I've got my light from the window coming in here, and I've got some light bouncing in here. Sometimes I put a reflector up here and bounce some light back in this way, and it just makes it, because cameras, even my really great pro cameras, all these really great iPhones, they still can't see as well as we can. So sometimes some of the shadow side of things will lose detail, and it just won't look as nice. So bouncing a little bit of light back in basically makes it look to the camera like what we see with our own eyes. Okay, let's go back down and see if that water's boiling. Okay, so the water is boiling. I've got my kitchen assistant, Tommy, hanging out right here. Yeah, he's just begging for food. So water's boiled. Like I said, they forgot to put the rice in, which sometimes happens with the test stuff. Doesn't happen in delivery. So I'm gonna make about a cup of rice, and I always keep the same type of rice on hand that they usually use. Jasmine rice. Just set the lid to the side. Give it a stir. One time. Doing this according to instructions. And then let it boil. I forgot how much time they told me. About 15 minutes. So set my timer for 15 minutes. I'm gonna turn my heat down just a little. Now, brown the beef. Okay, so I always let my skillet heat up first, and usually I also, this is not part of the instructions, but I do usually give my pan a quick light spray. It might affect the flavor just a little, so I try to use as little oil as I can, but I don't want things sticking and clumping up, because that might, with ground beef I'm probably safe, but I really don't want it. I want it to look as pretty as possible, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, let that come to heat. Whoops. I'm actually supposed to add some sesame oil because they knew that they forgot to add the sesame oil. So I do need a little sesame oil, 1 tablespoon. So I'll go ahead and put that in. Probably should have just used that. Another good reason just to use a little bit of the cooking spray. And that's an olive oil cooking spray that I usually use. Then I make sure to coat the pan evenly. Because again, I don't want things sticking, so I'm really being careful to do things the right way. Okay, so now I'm gonna put the beef in. Ooh, smell the garlic. It smells awesome. So it should give a nice sizzle, just like that. Normally I would put this in and walk away for a while. Maybe I go wash a couple dishes, try to do a little multitasking. But since this is being done for pictures, I better make sure I'm doing a nice job of browning the beef and getting it broken up nicely. So I sort of just keep smashing this. So I want nice fluffy pieces of ground beef. Okay, it's all nicely browned now. And then I'm just going to take it and go drain the beef. Okay. So I drained most of the fat off, maybe not as much as I normally would, but another thing I'm doing here is I'm going to keep some of the fat to help it look sort of glistening. So maybe a little bit more fat than what I would normally, definitely what instructions say to do, but also more than I normally would in a meal. But it's also not that much more. So just going to help the picture look fresh later. Now time to add the broccoli. So basically just mix this in until it's heated all the way through. And while I let that heat, I'm going to go get my plate. So I've actually decided to use this white pasta bowl. It's really nice for these, one dish dinners. And the white just looks really nice without taking over the photo. Like, sometimes I've discovered some really pretty plates kind of compete with the food, and this is about the food, right? Okay, now I'm going to stir in the sauce. Okay, so now it's time to stir in the sauce. What am I doing? I'm stirring in the sauce. Okay, so the sauce is in, and I just let it simmer until it's all heated completely through, which is about where it's at. And I'm actually going to go ahead and shut the heat off because I've got 2 minutes on the rice, and I don't want this broccoli, I don't want the broccoli turning to mush. And I sure don't want it changing color. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, where it kind of turns into this olive green color. So that would not look nice. So with 1.5 minutes now left for rice, I'm going to set up my straining station for the rice, and then I will plate. Okay, there's the timer. I'm going to get the rice. All right, I forgot to hit start. So I started with some rice that's mounted up in the middle. And then I started plating and putting things on. Make sure I've got a nice distribution of broccoli, and then a nice amount of sauce to kind of pour over the top to make sure it's nice and glistening. Okay, so I'm losing daylight, so let's head back up to the studio. So we've got our setup ready to go. I'm going to kind of look at what's the prettiest side, and I'm going to face that towards the window because that's my main light. And you always want the thing you want people to pay attention to be the best lit. So for portraits, that's usually your face. For this, it's the prettiest side of the plate. And that's also part of why I have my fork and napkin over there, because it accents that side. Plus, if it's on the other side, it's just going to be in shadow. Now, one thing I forgot to do earlier was go ahead and set up my camera. So now I'm going to take my exposure. My ISO setting is still set up for the wedding I shot this weekend. Okay, so we're doing, actually I'm going to have to shut off this light for the video. So now you can't see me as well, but this is what we're looking at anyway. So let me see my exposure here. Boy, it's dark. Summertime is almost, fall's almost here. So I'm gonna have to add just a little bit of light in with that light. See what it looks like. Oh, I don't like that. I'm gonna tone it down just a little. So tone that down just a little notch so it fills in that dark side, gives me a little bit more light. It doesn't take over the picture. I think I'm gonna make this floret like that. I always have a paper towel up here to wipe my fingers. Okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe this piece of beef right in here. And beef photograph's pretty dark, so it's nice to have the broccoli because it's a little bit brighter. And I always take different angles. Keep a step stool around so I can get up over the top shot. Make sure that that's an awfully pretty side too. This piece of beef there. Let's just shoot a few more pieces. Don't like that broccoli. I like this broccoli better. Okay. Okay, and that's it. I'll show you how they all turned out right now. Goodbye, and thanks for following.